Hello, so in this PowerPoint I'm going to be talking about why technology is negative and that ultimately the advancement of technology will lead to a more dependent society with people who are overall unable to fully think for themselves. So my first argument for why technology is a negative thing is the decrease in privacy. As we've seen, an increase in technology and the use of technology has actually decreased the amount of privacy that people have. You can see this in our everyday lives. You're being monitored most of the time. There's security cameras and different devices that are watching us. And an example from the podcast is Steve, who was one of the first people to actually get a speeding ticket in the mail. His picture was sent to him, and he was given a ticket, didn't even know his picture was being taken. And that shows how his privacy was sort of invaded. He wasn't even aware, that his picture was being taken. He wasn't aware he was getting a ticket. He didn't know any of that was happening. And so when there's a lack of privacy, it ultimately results in a feeling of being violated and, ultimately just uncomfortable. My next argument is going to be that technology, more specifically Lizzie from the podcast, changes how and what we remember. Lizzie was designed, and this is explained in the podcast, but ultimately it was designed to be a remembrance agent. So it's definitely shown that technology has the ability to influence our train of thought. So Lizzie brings up different facts or different information about topics or people depending on what situation that is in. So that shows how she can change the train of thought and obviously what we remember and when we remember it, because she brings up, just little facts or little notes or topics depending on, the current situation. So she is in control ultimately of what is remembered and when it's remembered and how it's remembered. So my next claim is that humans are dependent on technology. Again, you can see this in our everyday world. We use computers, we use our cell phones, we use Google Maps to help us get around. We use phones for payments, we use phones for ordering things, for just communicating and sharing just basic information in our everyday lives. Most of us are pretty dependent on technology in some way or another, but an example from the podcast would be how Thad used Lizzie to help him get his PhD. And not only that, but he also used Lizzie to help him throughout his everyday life for the majority of the days. So, basically the only time that Thad didn't use Lizzie was when he was sleeping, when he was showering, and on his wedding day. So that definitely shows how he's dependent on it. But just in general, you can see different ways that humans are dependent on it. And the more that technology increases, the more people are going to be dependent on it. So I want to talk a little more about how Thad was given the ability to use Lizzie when he was earning his PhD, and how the college said that was okay because he'd be entering the real world using Lizzie consistently. I want to argue against that because I don't think that should be allowed. I don't think that one should be able to earn their degree with the assistance of a remembrance agent such as Lizzie. I think that people should be expected to know the information about the topics that they're studying if they want to earn a degree, in a specific field. I think that they should actually know, be able to apply, have a good knowledge and a good understanding of what they've learned in order to get a degree. And I think that anyone who uses a device like Lizzie to get their degree, or, in assessments or exams or tests, I think it sort of takes away the validity of the degree. Because all the hard work is basically done by, the technology, the technology that's like Lizzie. It's basically just does all the hard work, all the remembering, and all the application of the topics that you're learning. So I don't think that should be allowed. Another point that I want to argue against from the podcast is that technology, like Lizzie, is the same thing as eyeglasses. Now, I don't think that that's true. I can see how, the person in the podcast who said this, I can see how they could argue that. But I think that obviously eyeglasses are made to give people the ability to properly use their eyes when they have vision problems. But a device like Lizzie is actually giving you information, giving you facts, helping you remember things that you may have forgotten or that you may not actually even know. It's changing how you think, what you think about, and what you say too. And eyeglasses don't do that. Eyeglasses are just giving you the ability to fully use your eyes. And then the last point that I want to make is the possibility of technology failure. So if technology just failed for some crazy reason, or if there was a wipeout of our power grids and we had no more access to this type of technology, how would people be able to function? How would doctors and nurses be able to do their jobs? Let's just say that doctors and nurses were able to graduate and then work using devices like Lizzie. How would they be able to function if their technology failed? They wouldn't, they wouldn't have any knowledge. They wouldn't be able to apply it. People are dependent on this technology, and that could cause a huge problem if the technology were to fail. And, all we're left with is our brain. And so if we aren't able to remember things, if we aren't able to apply things ourselves, if we depend on technology to do that for us, and then technology fails, we're kind of just left without anything. So just really quick in conclusion, I think that yes, technology has obviously been shown to tremendously change our quality of life and our abilities, but I think overall its negative impact is a little bit greater than the positive. Just like I mentioned, people are more dependent on it. People, we don't need to know as much as we used to know because we can just look it up on our phones. And if there's devices like Lizzie allowing people to graduate and to work, not having to remember things, it'll ultimately just have negative impacts, and the positive impacts won't shine through. So this last slide is just my citations of all my pictures as well as the podcast.